Hello there, fairy tale friends. My name is Fina, and I want to welcome you to a StoryPath here on SoundTales. A StoryPath. It's like a tale with both light and shadow. A story that goes a little deeper, where not everything is kind, but where courage and cleverness always finds a place. Maybe you feel something in your body as you listen. A tingle, a squeeze in your chest, or just a quiet curiosity. And that's okay. Just lean back and let's begin our path with a tale of Rumpelstiltskin. Once upon a time, there was a girl who lived with her father, an old miller. Their house stood at the edge of a forest where the wind often whistled through the cracks in the walls, and the mill wheel creaked as if it were talking to itself. The girl was kind, clever, and curious. She helped her father with the mill, gathered herbs in the forest, and often sang to herself while she worked. She was content with her simple life, but her father longed for something more. He was proud, sometimes so proud that he said things that weren't exactly true. And one day, while in town to sell his flour, he started to brag.
Yeah. Oh yes. My daughter isn't like the others. No. She can spin straw into gold.
He told a few men outside the castle gates. The men laughed, but a voice silenced them. The king had overheard. He smiled, but it was a cold smile. Spinning straw into gold. I would like to see that, he said slowly. Before the miller could think it through, he nodded.
Of course, she can do it. Of course she can do it.
That evening, soldiers knocked on the door of the little house. The girl looked at her father, but he looked away, and she was taken to the castle. The girl traveled in silence. The horses trotted through the night, and the carriage rocked so much that she held tightly to the edge the whole way. She didn't know what awaited her, only that something had changed, and not necessarily for the better. When they arrived at the castle, she was led up a narrow staircase, higher and higher, until they stopped at a heavy door. There stood the king. He smiled again. That same strange smile that felt cold, even though his voice was pleasant.
Inside you'll find straw, a great deal of it. If you can turn it into gold by morning, well, then you shall be rewarded.
His eyes narrowed. But if you cannot, then you shall die. The door shut and locked. The girl stood alone in the room. Bundles of straw were stacked high in the corners. A spinning wheel stood in the middle of the floor. She walked slowly forward, slumped down on the floor, looked at her hands. They were still dusty with flour from the mill. How am I supposed to spin straw into gold? It's impossible, she whispered. She wrapped her arms around her knees, tried to breathe calmly, and then, in the stillness, she heard a sound. A scrape. A step. A laugh. Out of the shadows stepped a small figure, not much taller than a child, with wild hair, a long coat trailing in the dust, and eyes that sparkled like mischief.
Well now, why so glum?
He said, stroking his chin. The girl backed away. Who are you?
Someone who can help, if you want me to.
Do you know how to spin straw into gold? She whispered.
Oh, yes, yes. But I don't work for free,
he said, grinning. He walked over to the spinning wheel, ran his fingers along it, as if it were a musical instrument.
So what will you give me?
The girl hesitated. Then she took off a little wooden necklace, carved by her mother, that she always wore. It's all I have.
Perfect. Let's begin,
said the little man. He sat down at the spinning wheel and got to work. The thread spun, twisted, danced between his fingers and the wheel. The girl sat in the corner, staring. She could hardly believe her eyes. Straw after straw transformed into shimmering golden thread. He worked quickly, as if he'd done it 1,000 times before. And before the night was over, all the straw had been turned to gold. When morning came, the door creaked open. The king stepped inside, and his eyes glittered more than the gold itself. He didn't speak at first. He simply walked around, slowly letting his fingers glide over the piles of gleaming thread. Then he turned to her. Excellent, truly excellent, but we need more, he said. He summoned his guards. The girl was taken to a new room, bigger than before, with even more straw. She looked around. The walls felt taller, the air colder. She knew what was coming. And sure enough, when the night fell, the same sound returned. A scrape, a step, a laugh.
Back again? What will you offer me tonight?
Said the little man, bowing deeply. The girl took a deep breath. Then she slid off a silver ring, a gift from her grandmother. It was small, delicate, and her most treasured possession. I have this, she said quietly.
Excellent! Let's begin,
he said. When the king saw the new room full of gold, he smiled with his whole face. But it was a smile that only looked kind if you didn't look too closely. Incredible, you are truly something special, but I need more, just once more, he said. And he took her to a third room, bigger than the other two. The walls were high and cold, and the straw lay in mountains. The girl felt her body go heavy. She had nothing left to give away. And when the night fell, the sound came again, the scrape, the step, and the laugh.
So, what will you offer me tonight, my friend?
Said the little man. The girl sat silent, her hands in her lap. I have nothing left. He looked at her a long time. Then he leaned closer.
One day, when you have a child, you will give it to me.
The girl's eyes widened.
What? That's my price, my dear. A promise. A deal. You'll live through this night, and in the morning you will be rewarded. But one day, I will come to collect.
A chill crept down her spine. She hesitated, then nodded, slowly, as if she barely understood what she was agreeing to.
Very well. We have a deal, he said.
And he began to spin, faster than ever. Gold thread flew across the floor until the room glowed like a sunrise. And when the sun rose, the door opened once more. The king stepped in, and when he saw the gold, his breath caught in his throat.
Unbelievable. Truly unbelievable,
he said softly. He walked up to the girl, took her hand and raised it as if she were a prize he had won.
You shall be my queen. No one else in the world has your gift,
he said. The girl stared at him. She didn't know what she felt. Shock, perhaps. Fear. Exhaustion. But she knew she had no choice. And so, she became a queen. Time passed. The castle filled with silk, mirrors, and whispering servants. But deep inside the queen, the memory remained of the straw-filled rooms, the little man's voice, and the promise she had never spoken of to anyone. Years went by, and one day, a child was born, a baby girl, healthy and warm, with eyes that sparkled just like her mother's. And that very night, when all was still and the guards had fallen asleep, the sound returned. The scrape, the step, the laugh.
I have come to collect what's mine,
he said with a grin. The queen stared at him, clutching her baby close to her chest.
No, I can't. I can't, not my child, she whispered.
You gave your word. A promise is a promise,
he said. The queen dropped to her knees.
Please, take whatever you want. Here, take my gold. Take my life, but not her.
The little man studied her for a long time. Then he snapped his fingers.
You have 3 days. If you can guess my name by the end of those 3 days, the child stays with you. But if not, she is mine.
And then he vanished into the shadows. The next morning, the queen gathered her advisors. She asked them to write down every name they could think of. Common names, royal names, names from faraway lands, names of stars and animals. And when the night came, she stood ready.
Is your name Birdhill?
No.
Gustav?
No.
Maybe Star-Eye?
No, and no. See you tomorrow night.
On the second day, she rode out from the castle far into the woods. She asked old women, wise men, wanderers, and hunters. Everyone gave her different names, and she wrote every one of them down. That evening, she read them aloud, one by one.
Could it be Torvald? Or Moonlight? Or maybe Pym?
But he just smiled and shook his head.
Not even close.
The queen sent out servants across the entire kingdom to gather names. One of them rode farther than anyone else, through brambles and dark forest paths, until, on the final night, he saw a flickering light between the trees. He crept closer. There, in a clearing deep in the woods, a small man danced around a crackling fire. He jumped, spun, and laughed to himself. The servant hid behind a tree and held his breath. The little man sang, with a disturbing giggle in his voice.
She promised it softly, her voice barely there. A heartbeat for mine, a child laid bare. The second night wanes, the stars lose their flame. Then none shall be safe when Rumpelstiltskin speaks his name.
The servant stared, first in shock, then in triumph. He crept back to his horse and galloped wildly through the night, back toward the castle. That night, the queen could not sleep. She paced the nursery, holding her daughter in her arms and whispering promises to protect her. The next morning, the same servant came rushing into the castle. I saw a little man dancing around a fire last night, laughing and singing to himself. He sang, the second night wanes, the stars lose their flame, then none shall be safe when Rumpelstiltskin speaks his name. The queen stared at him. What did you say he sang? She said. The servant repeated the words, and the queen smiled for the first time in a long, long while. That evening she stood tall as the little man entered the nursery. He looked confident, pleased with himself.
Well, do you know my name? He said.
The queen pretended to think. Is it Casper?
Wrong,
he said with a chuckle.
Ulrich? Nope.
She smiled. Then perhaps Rumpelstiltskin. The man's eyes flew wide open. He stumbled backwards as if somebody had pushed him.
Who told you that?
You did. But you didn't know someone was listening, the queen said calmly. A scream of fury burst from the little man. He stomped the ground so hard that dust swirled into the air. Then he spun his stubby feet, flailed his arms, and disappeared with a shriek that echoed through the walls. The door slammed shut on his own, and silence fell. The queen held her daughter close. Her heart still pounded, but she knew it was over. And from that day on, she slept with open windows, without fear, with her child close. The end. And so ends the tale of Rumpelstiltskin, a story about promises and about standing up for what matters, even when you're afraid. Sometimes we make choices because we don't know any better, and sometimes we promise more than we mean to. But when we get a chance to try again, to be brave, wise, and true to what we love, that's how we grow. Maybe you'll carry something from this story with you. A feeling, a picture, a new way to think about what a name can mean. Thank you for walking this story path with me today. Do you want to hear more stories? Then I'll see you again soon, here on SoundTales. Bye-bye.